Vasudevaya. Na dehinam sukham kinchid vidyate vidushamapi tatha cha dukkham mudhanam vritahan karanam param. Translation and purport by the humble disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. It is observed within the material world that sometimes even an intelligent person is not happy. Similarly, sometimes even a great fool is happy. The concept of becoming happy through expertly performing material activities is simply a useless exhibition of false egoism. Purport. It may be argued that an intelligent person can expertly perform pious activities within the material world and thus never experience suffering, since unhappiness is caused by sinful or impious activities. However, we often observe great suffering even among pious, intelligent persons because they sometimes fail in the execution of their duty and sometimes consciously or unconsciously perform a forbidden activity. With this argument, the Lord refutes the theory that simply on the strength of material piety, one may remain perpetually happy without Krishna consciousness. On the other hand, we observe that even the most foolish or sinful persons sometimes experience happiness, because even those completely dedicated to sin sometimes accidentally perform pious activities by inadvertently traveling through a holy place or helping a saintly person. The material creation of God is so complex and bewildering that even those dedicated to piety sometimes commit sins, and even those dedicated to sinful life sometimes perform pious actions. Therefore, within the material world, we do not find absolute happiness or unhappiness. Rather, every conditioned soul is hovering in confusion without perfect knowledge. Piety and sin are relative material ideas that bestow relative happiness and unhappiness. Absolute happiness is experienced on the spiritual platform in full Krishna consciousness or love of God. Thus, material life is always ambiguous and relative, whereas Krishna consciousness is the actual platform of perfect happiness. Hare Krishna. So today, in this verse, we hear about happiness and distress, and we also hear about intelligence. So the concept of happiness, distress, as it said, we cannot have absolute happiness or distress in this world. It is relative. And we need intelligence to understand our position. Actually, every person is looking after happiness. That is an obvious phenomena. And I was reading just last week, if you see the latest Back to Godhead, and there's a very nice article by Vishakha Mataji, Srila Prabhupada disciple. So it is called The Joy of Devotion. And she starts by saying that basically it is our birthright. It is our natural constitutional nature in our birthright to be happy. So wanting to be happy is not something which we need to feel guilty about, or which we need to kind of hide behind certain external duties and so on. It's something which it's the natural nature of the soul, but the nature has to really discover its swadharma, which is to serve. So that is why the whole Krishna consciousness process is only simply to link us to our original nature. So it doesn't mean that when you come to Krishna consciousness, it means we have to give up happiness to go through austerity, because our mental concoction says that, when we have to take a process which is alien to us, like it's something very different, we may be used to a certain pattern of lifestyle which is giving us happiness. And then when we change, if we come to Krishna consciousness, we start chanting our rounds, and when we start attending temple, we have new friends. So we feel that this diversion of lifestyle, or this change of lifestyle, is an austerity, which, yes, we perceive it initially because it's very different to us. But that should not give us the impression that coming to Krishna consciousness means giving up happiness. On the contrary, it is actually to discover the real happiness. And we have for this, we have to see from the eyes of the Shastra, because if we go by our own feelings, today, without any guidance from Shastra, our nature is to just go by our senses. What we feel, we will do. But that way the senses, like the stone, for instance, has no senses. And even, like say trees, for instance, they have consciousness, but their consciousness is not so developed. So basically we can conclude that the development of our consciousness is really what will give us the perception to understand what is happiness and what is not. So process of Krishna consciousness is to perceive Krishna in everything, which means our development of our consciousness. So the development of our consciousness is really perceiving Krishna in everything. So that actually is really giving us the understanding of where lies our contentment, peace, happiness. And it can be contrary superficially to the external happenings in our life. Like we may be going through a storm. Suddenly, in the last week, for instance, you may have gone through some sudden surge of bad news. Many things have just not happened the way it was supposed to happen, and you're feeling completely in turmoil externally. But if we follow this, if we understand from the Shastra, and that is why it is said that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, when we say that means hearing the Bhagavatam, hearing devotees, meaning hearing the Shastras, reading philosophy in any connection that we have to Krishna consciousness. Why is it important? Is because it gives us that stability to understand from the real senses, which is really seen from Krishna's point of view. And Krishna is, the Supreme Lord is eternal, the Spirit Soul is eternal. So basically, this reciprocation is eternal. That's a simple formula to understand. So this, we have to see what is eternal and what is temporary. And the problem is that we do get caught up in the temporary nature of happiness. Now, what I've said is, I think most of us here would probably have heard it dozens of times, and we know this philosophy. But somehow, the beauty of Krishna consciousness and the beauty of hearing Bhagavatam and hearing lectures and attending satsang is that the same thing, we may hear it, but it may we may understand in a different way on a different day. And that is what is realization. So because we may have really perceived something, or we may have actually gone through something just yesterday, and something clicks and then says, actually, this makes sense. This is what actually happens. So the amazing thing is how the realizations, our experiences, can dovetail into the Shastra's conclusions. But to do that, we need to follow certain process. And the reason why we first give up the gross addictions are basically because unless you come to a certain basic, for instance, if somebody is in a drunken stupor, is constantly drinking or having illicit activities, it's very difficult for such a person to even comprehend this. And really speaking, the world at large, the material world, is intoxicated. So we may be literally drunk with liquor, or we may be intoxicated by the whole atmosphere, the Maya, be misguided, let's say, by different conclusions. And because of that, to come back to reality, we have to follow a certain process. And for those who have actually got this benefit, the starting point is to acknowledge and to appreciate, be grateful that why is it that I've got this opportunity? Why is it that, so externally something painful must have happened and somehow, but and then when we look back and say that if that had not happened, I wouldn't have actually, it would not have knocked me on the head to make me realize that that was necessary for me to open my eyes. That was, without that, I would never have come to Krishna consciousness. So, real intelligence is to perceive everything in connection with Krishna. Even our challenges or problems are actually creation of Krishna. Or we can see that Krishna is, we hear from the Shastra, that much we have faith that Krishna is in control of everything and that Krishna wants us to be happy. This is a very important point. Krishna wants us to be happy. And at the same time, Krishna creates what we call as problems. A business has failed, a financial difficulty, suddenly a health crisis has come, or suddenly relationships have broken. So we say that, so we have to dive a little bit deeper into this. This is where we need to probe. This is where realizations will come when we hear the Shastra. That how is it that Krishna wants us to be happy, and the problems are also created by Krishna. He's in the heart of my so-called enemy. He's in the heart of my, my competitor, or whoever we see as somebody who's consuming our mind with giving us sleepless nights or whatever. How do we reconcile the two? So we have to see that whatever circumstances Krishna creates in our life is really out of his kindness, out of his mercy, that is guiding us, because we have gone through this many, many lives, and this life, if we get this opportunity, he wants us to go back to him so that we don't come back to him at all. So, same way we can, Prabhupada once said that you need intelligence to be happy. Now, we have so far been thinking that intelligence means some scientist is very intelligent, or somebody who's very successful materially is very intelligent. So our equation of intelligence is related to a certain specific criterion that someone is having a huge bank balance, or someone has discovered something. He can't create anything, but he says made a discovery. So that's a brilliant. But if that person does not understand the basic reality, and this is a real fact which even anybody can, can see, that for instance, a body has hands, legs, nose, mouth, all the parts of the body. And when that body is dead, we want to dispose it off immediately. So we can clearly see that that body is not what was giving us happiness. Can we ask the dead body that all the parts are there, now you'll be happy? No. So we can conclude that that spiritual spark, that enjoying energy has gone. Now this is a foundation of everything that we want to do. At least mentally we can see that. And this is, why do we dispose of the body immediately? Because the person is gone. Who's gone? That spirit soul is gone. So that means we have to now see from the eyes of what is required for the spirit soul. And that, if we don't have that understanding and we don't live our life according to that, on the contrary, we live our life according to something which makes us forget this, so then do we call that intelligence? So therefore, even we have to question what is intelligence. When Prabhupada says that you have to be intelligent to be happy, just one simple statement, it's a very profound statement that even to be happy, first of all, you have to understand on what basis, what is the real platform of happiness. So it doesn't mean that we don't enjoy the other, when we see everything coming from Krishna, then, like for instance, we have family, we have our occupation, we have our other responsibilities. I mean, we go through life. So there is no dichotomy. It is not that I have to enjoy only internally when I'm in the temple and then outside I have to be miserable. No. It is our consciousness that changes and sees, then we see everything that we do in relation to Krishna. So that means when we see, we have to have a motive. No? Just like a mother with a small baby, one may see from external point of view and say that the most suffering person is a mother. Doesn't get to sleep, doesn't, 24 hours, and is so miserable. But no, externally you may think like that. But ask the mother. Mother says, no mother will ever say that I don't want it. Every mother will say that there's nothing comparable to that, even though there are these challenges. There's a lack of sleep and tiredness and all that. So why? Because there's a perception difference. Then you can see that actually there is pleasure in sacrifice, there's pleasure in protection, there's pleasure in caring, concern for others, right? So just an analogy. So similarly here, we see that it's a matter of seeing from the real platform that what is my real happiness. But at the same time, externally, I can also find pleasure when I see things through Krishna. So if I have a motive, like the mother is a motive because it's got a responsibility over its child, her child. Similarly, we have a responsibility, so we may not like, for instance, our job, or we may not like our environment. But if we actually have an ulterior environment, ulterior goal, or ulterior pleasure, which is really that I've got limited time, we may be 30, 40, 50 years, then we see how quickly time has gone. I'm not going to have that much more time ahead of me, right? I mean, these are the basic things. So if I've got limited time, and this is a reality, then let me see how I can, and now I'm grateful that Krishna has given me this opportunity. So I will start seeing things from Krishna's point of view, which is guided by a spiritual master or by Vaishnavas, by people who are mentors, people whom we respect, people whose judgment we appreciate and also we trust. So in which case, then we start seeing that if I am having some problems in my workplace, or if I'm having some problem with my relationships, then I also need to see with myself. So the finger points in me also that what can I do? Then we start seeing that there are things which we cannot control, there are things which we can control. For instance, if there's an earthquake or there's heavy rain and the building collapses, for instance, it's a horrible situation and everything gets destroyed. But that's not something which we could control. Maybe we could have moved out, but that is a detail. But basically, we can't. There's many things which we can't control. But there are things which we can control, and we find that there are lots of things which cause misery because of our nature. It may be our reaction to events. It may be that our understanding of what has happened, and then we, our natures will change very much. We may be argumentative, maybe causing problems. So therefore, this is what appreciation of gratitude to Krishna will reveal, that we have to concentrate on what we can do. And when we come to that level, then we understand how, say for instance, yogis, we may hear of yogis who have gone to, whether they've gone to the Himalayas or whether they're bhakti yogis who are in, brahmacharis, they're in Chopati. Now for 30 years we have this temple. One would say that don't we need a temple in a peaceful place? But they have done this only because of that we have come to the temple. So our appreciation grows. And then not only appreciation, but we understand what we need to do. That if they are doing it for others, then we can do it also. What we have got, we pass it on. If you have gone through races in school, the best, the winning team is not necessarily the fastest. The winning team is the ones which really pass the baton the most smoothly. If you've seen some of the fastest runners, unfortunately, if they don't pass the baton is the stick which one hands to the other. They may be actually ahead of the others, but then they just fumble at the time of giving the baton, and then they fall behind. So the passing the baton becomes very important. So this passing the baton is really passing our experiences or our understanding, what we have got, what we have received from the past, what we've received from all our seniors or Guru Maharaj, from Shastra, from Krishna ultimately. If we pass it on, our concentration is entirely on that, how we pass it on. That passing the baton, it gives us great pleasure because we see that it is a seamless transition. And so whom can we do it to? People whom we are responsible to. So what do we represent? What Krishna wants from us? What is my duty? What is my responsibility? What can I do to serve? If that consumes us, then slowly our dependence or our people in that circle of influence that we have will also be seeing accordingly. So not knowing happiness, the basic needs of happiness, makes us divert from the real happiness. It's a deviation. And that's where the problems lie, because then we clutch at different things. Because as I said earlier, the need for happiness is basic and the need is justified. In fact, as Vishaka Mataji quoted, that it is our right to be blissful. To be blissful, to be joyful is our right. So it's a question of where we look for. It's not a question of avoiding that. It's a question of just, taking our torch. We're looking in the wrong room. We just have to switch the sides. So once we look at that, then we see that developing our Krishna consciousness yields results. When we start developing, it means that we start then seeing things the way, means it is like cleaning up our mind, cleaning up our hearts. Then our intelligence gets purified. When the intelligence gets purified, we start seeing things. Our judgments also start becoming stabler. Also, our sense of discrimination, what we should do, what we should not do, will also happen. Our ability to absorb the challenges that are there, but challenges never remain. And good things also never remain. It goes up and down. It's like a roller coaster. And but the beauty of the mind is that, of Maya, is that it makes us forget that this is a roller coaster. But if you actually go to see, we don't keep a diary like this, but if you actually go to see and see that, try to trace, there have been some really, really miserable times. There have been some really ecstatic times. We may say that during my school days, or I go on my holidays, or before my father passed away, my mother passed away, we had such wonderful time when I used to go to my native village, whatever we may see. But then we don't realize that when because it's now, time has gone, and then in school days we may have felt miserable during exams, or somebody stole your pencil, or you had some fight. These were small things. But then there may have been one or two big incidents in school. And so we don't remember this, but it has been a roller coaster. And as we grow older, as our consciousness also has either developed more or it has gone more attached to the material things, we feel the pain or pleasure more acutely. So once we understand that, then the process of Krishna consciousness will yield us stability, will help us in the sense of discrimination, that we can see it's a passing phase. Everything will change, and ultimately the final conclusion is that this life is temporary, and there is danger at every step. So when we know that the Shastras have said this millions of years ago, that means those who have lived billions of years ago have also felt the same as me. I may say that my situation is a little different, but no. Basically, people who were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, would have also gone through these cycles, but then their consciousness would have made them be much more sattvic or tamasic according to what they have chosen. So the biggest opposition to happiness is fear. And because we have apprehension, tension, fear, anxiety, right? That stops us from being happy. But if you see that Prabhupada said that the answer to happiness, to remove fear, you need knowledge. Knowledge is the ultimate destroyer of fear, because once you understand, and that knowledge comes from understanding what Krishna consciousness or what God consciousness is. That is the real education. So when we go through this, we see that, and why is it that Prabhupada, 1944, when he started the Back to Godhead, it's amazing that if you see those 1944, those were stapled copies basically. They were not even, so even there, he had a logo, Back to Godhead, and then what was written on top is exactly what was written 74 years later today on the Back to Godhead magazines, that Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there is light. So what it means is that there is no darkness when there is Krishna. So this is he put this as a title right on top of the on the title Back to Godhead, but above that the logo, near the logo, he has put right on the center that where there is Godhead, there is light, and there is and when there's light, there is no nescience, no darkness. So primarily this kind of understanding and meditating on that what Krishna wants is really necessary for reviving our Krishna consciousness and reviving our, actually reviving our friendship with Krishna, because Krishna is a real friend. And when we do that, then we will really have relief from our two main problems. Two main problems which we normally face is hankering and lamentation. If you go to see, basically, no matter what our age, no matter where we are, what our background is, whether we are in the west or the east or whichever part of the world we are in, living entity, if he doesn't have a God consciousness, will be tormented by hankering and lamentation. Hankering means, desperately, means we always have desires. I only wish this happens, that happens, and we want this, we want that. And if you go to see the basic things that people pursue, for instance, wealth, for instance, right? People want financial success, financial needs. But then to the extent that we pursue that so strongly, see the result, for instance. Today there has never been in the history a greater divide between the haves and the have-nots, in the whole world. So there is, one statistic will mention everything, that just less than 1% of the world controls 60% of the wealth. Less than 1% of the population controls more than 60% of the wealth. So this disparity is what has come through by hundreds of years of desperate hankering of going only towards success. The people who are our successful role models are also generally ones who have made it in life. Like, you rarely find someone who's down and out, doesn't have a job or is going through difficulties. If he's just an ordinary person who's not seen anywhere, not read about, not mentioned in newspapers, nobody even looks at him. That means our values are not according to what is a character. The value is according to what he's achieved or she's achieved. Basically, the power, the externals that is visible. So it induces us to be more flashy, or to exhibit our, because the urge becomes that without that, what is the use of I have all this wealth if I don't show it? Today we have an industry, literally an industry called destination weddings. I don't know if you've heard this word, destination weddings. So like 20, 30 years ago, it was unheard of. I mean, you generally want to get married, you hire a hall and two families come together and they have various programs. But now destination wedding is an industry. I mean, recently a friend of mine, a college friend, he had called me and said that his wife does this, so if you ever have, I said, my 3 children are married and my grandson is 15 years away, but I'll remember it. So I was asking him what it means. So like, for instance, she specializes in Thailand. So if you want to get married, so this obviously means expenses. So people who have the money, this is one way that whether you want to have a marriage on a big ship or a marriage in Thailand, that means having few hundred people all flying in there and the whole event. So it's an event management. So my point is that if you have an industry, that means so many people are involved, and that means so many people are actually frequenting it. So this is one way to show that people need to spend money. So you may spend 50 crores or 100 crores for a marriage, and I've seen that sometimes they've spent 200-300 crores, but the marriage may not last for more than 3-4 years, unfortunately. It is actually, it happens very often. But they're only concerned with just, more important is that people should know that they have the money. Or you build a house which could be, maybe worth 500 crores or 1,000 crores, thing like that, so that people talk about it. So the whole push for us is to display our wealth. So I was reading one mail which was just talking about some apparent paradoxes, some contradictions. So it summarizes about, when we say about wealth, that people today, there's so much wealth, there's so much disparity. So we can say that there are now bigger houses but smaller families. Houses have become bigger, but the families have become smaller. We have multiplied our possessions, but reduced our values. So, we have increased the wrong things. Possessions may have increased, but at the expense of cutting down on values. We have fancier houses, but broken homes. We have more comfort, with more gadgets, more transportation, but less time. Because generally, everyone says we don't have time. But if you see 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there were no mobiles and there was no metros and people had to walk long distances, but nobody talked about the shortage of time as much as we do now. So this is really a paradox that after all these conveniences, we are still finding ourselves short. So in short, we have learned to, we've learned how to make a living, but not a life. So our World Health Organization has also mentioned that the biggest problem today and the biggest problem over the next 70, 80 years is mental problems. And you see this frequently. If you read newspapers also, more and more people, even known people, and unexpectedly they're unfortunately committing suicide. And not just in India, all over the world. A very famous comedian in the US, one of the most successful persons. Now his job was to make people laugh. But then he himself in his own life was so miserable, he went into depression and then he killed himself. So people, the externals are something which it puts the pressure on everyone, especially on the successful people, to keep pretending that they're successful and they're happy, which they don't feel that. And then they see that there's such a big difference, it just, because you can't live a life which is not, you can't fake it for long. And then they become so miserable, they go into depression and then small thing, because they've achieved so much, and then if they don't consistently get it, and that is not possible, so in which case then they cannot live with not having that. Similarly, we are so attached to the bodily features, so everyone would like to look decent, look nice, but if we really put so much emphasis on good looks, and it's again that's become a $200 billion industry. Just the fashion and the perfume industry is more than $200 billion and one of the most profitable ones. But what has that led to? Because the more we consumed internally about ourselves, how we look, the more the urge is to make ourselves attractive to the opposite sex, the more it is to be noticed. We have fancier, brands and so on. And because if you are on an island, assuming you're on an island, you're all alone, this would have no value because nobody is going to see you. But you need to, you're driven by the urge that you need to be appreciated. So everyone needs to be appreciated. But if it goes to the extent that, that it becomes such an important aspect of your life that your happiness depends on that, then you're looking for appreciation, looking for good words, looking for people to say that, whether they mean it or not, then, it really affects our mind when we don't receive it. And in fact, our attitudes change and then people respond accordingly. And then because of the attraction of the opposite sex, today what has that led to? That today we know that, making a relationship work compared to 50 years ago, today is a much, much bigger challenge. Less people stay together for more than 20, 30 years. More and more people are separating. Nowadays, people enter into contracts before they get married, especially the rich people, so that they decide who gets how much if the marriage doesn't last. It's a very formal legal contract that they sign. So what does it mean? That they are not even making an attempt, they are giving up, they're assuming that the marriage may not last. How can you enter a marriage with thinking that it cannot last? So this has gone to the extreme levels because of, in some countries there are more children born out of wedlock. Wedlock means when the child is born when the parents are not married. There are more children born out of wedlock than children who are born out of legally registered marriage couples. So there are live-in relationships. So why is that happening then? Because people are attracted, they would like to spend time with the opposite sex, but they are going for the now and immediate. That when the body is young, when we are successful, when we are doing well, and when we would like to have a relationship. But I don't know whether I will need after 5 years or 10 years. And both parties agree that, okay, let's enjoy it for some time and then we'll see. So this is tragic, and especially if there is a child involved. Can you imagine what is the situation if we were born in such a family where the parents' only concern was that we'll enjoy for whatever time we have, and then it's okay, we part, as friends, as they call it. I can't understand how there can be a friendship when there is a separation. But this kind of attitude would mean it's a very individualistic attitude. That means only looking after myself. It completely. So what it does is it takes us away from our roots. Our roots are where we get what we learned from our parents, grandparents, that people used to stay in joint families. The people would share everything. There would be, that is what India really, I would say, leads the world. That even in the smaller towns and villages, today it is very prevalent. In Mumbai, at least there is still, in the big cities, the shortage of space may not make the joint family concept work. At least in the middle classes and lower middle class, there's much more values, so that even if they don't stay together, at least they own the responsibility for the parents. But what is happening wherever the society is becoming westernized, when we're incorporating Western values, which are highly individualistic, selfish, that is, I am only living for myself or for what is my immediate circle. So my immediate circle may mean my children for the time being, means when a small child, we really enjoy it. But when the child is 15, 17, and then it becomes, then you just say, you live your life, I live my life. So it's really basically you're gratifying your senses. As long as your senses go, what you're feeling is that I don't want a burden of getting my daughter married, or I don't want to get a burden of helping my son. I don't want them to be having, if they have different views, I don't want them to be staying with me. I push them out. So that attitude comes through because of the nature of, so at least the emotional needs get broken. So even if physically they're not together, but at least the emotional needs can be met if the families are there. Many of you may have experienced, but how in joint families, there is automatically a feeling of taking care of other people's, other members and other people's children. There are some family friends of ours whom we've known for 5 generations, and it's amazing because the generation which is around my age, that's the 3rd generation. And his grandfather and my grandfather, they were together some 70, 80 years ago. So now from childhood, they call their father Kaka. So I was wondering why they call Kaka. Because when they were young, his older cousin would call his father Kaka because he was, because they were brought up together, so he also started calling, and he still calls his father Kaka. And when he says father, he calls someone else father. I mean, it's amazing, and it's not a joke, it's just a natural thing. That's such an integration of the family that, it's really, they have a responsibility for not just my sibling, but others also. My wife and I are married for 41 years, but I've heard so often from her, because she's the oldest of 5 sisters, and many times she has said that through the marriage, means one of the important points in her consciousness has always been that how I have a responsibility because I'm the oldest of the family, and she was only 21 when we both were 21 when we got married. But how I would adjust to the family, new family, how I will adjust to my in-laws, how I will adjust to my husband, because ours was arranged marriage. It dominated her thoughts because she's saying that I am the oldest. If I don't do my responsibility well, what it will reflect on my other 4 sisters? They have to get married. And it shouldn't. So this it comes naturally to people who have taken responsibility for beyond their own life, that they find happiness in that. So when we look at happiness, we get satisfaction, we get contentment, we share the sorrows, we share the happiness of others. And then there is such a balance that brings to our life. So this is very prevalent in our society. So actually Indians, in that sense, can take up Krishna consciousness much more easily. Prabhupada said this so many times, that it is almost there. But he said that in India, we are this close from Krishna consciousness, but we're looking the other way. And the Westerners are so far, but many of them at least looking this side, because they have seen, especially in the times when he went to the West and they were, the hippies were rejected society and so on. So basically, our only approach is, when he was talking of that, he was talking mostly of the people who have highly been westernized. But fortunately, today, lots of people still live in the villages and small towns and where value systems are important. So we can see that, if we pursuing good looks is also something which makes us highly individualistic, selfish, and self-centered. Same way, if you look at education, something which is basic to all of us. But today, if it becomes a desperation that, unless I do well, that's the be-all and end-all, rather than doing my best. But if that consumes us, that it is critical that my only goal is to get, this many marks, and I have to achieve these degrees. And if we fail to do that, we do not estimate the effect it has on the psyche of others. So instead of encouraging children to do what they can and see that it is part of life, and also they do as much as they can, but some may not have this inclination. And some may have an academic inclination. But we make this the most important priority, and we also give the impression to everyone, to our children, that if you are very inferior if you don't have a degree. I can share that when I was relatively, before I came to the movement, I did feel that when my mother was 5th standard pass, she's from Surat and she was very simple. But so I would think that, well, compared to her, some of the other members who had actually studied more, so immediately you first think that, well, that is, someone is like a backward. But when I see now, it's so apparent that it is immaterial. In fact, the wisdom that she had, and which many millions of, especially in India, you have, the maturity of how to handle, coming at the age of 16 or 17 into a new house, and to really become the backbone of a large family, to integrate into a joint family, to raise the children, to sacrifice for them, to see that emotionally everybody depends on her really. That kind of maturity and wisdom we can appreciate now. It is immaterial whether somebody has studied 5th standard or 10th according to our standards. And what do our books teach us ultimately? If they don't tell us basic things, that there is a God is a creator, that he controls everything, and that our role is to find our love for him and to go back to him. If that is not if that is not taught, what is the value of our education? Yes, practically speaking, you can't say you can abandon it because we have to live in society. But we have to at least perceive it that I will do what I need to do. And if I've been given that kind of intelligence academically, I will do the best. If I've got intelligence to be creative and artistic and I've got those kind of talents, I'll do that. Or if I've got intelligence, everybody's got some talent. If I've got intelligence, I'm much more hands-oriented, creative, which I can set up my own work. Whatever comes to us, that becomes a part of our life, but not the main part. We don't find God anywhere in our education. So this is an atheistic education. That is why Prabhupada used such a heavy word when he said slaughterhouse education. It shook many people, but this is what he meant. So he's not said you don't have books and don't study. You have to do what is there. There are so many things in life we may not accept. Okay, if you got a house on the 32nd floor, then if you're born in that, you say, I'm not going to stay there. No, it's not that. Your consciousness is what needs to change. It's not that where we are, who we are. It is what we want to become, what we want to achieve, and how we can live our future life is what is important. So therefore, understanding the consciousness or understanding of what education means becomes vital. Otherwise, it is as they say, that we have more degrees but less sense. We have more knowledge but less wisdom. And we have more experts but the wrong solutions. So the problem with modern education, it is that primarily that it's destroying our culture, because it is pushing us towards individualism and my individual achievements. And again, as I say, that we do see, especially in India, still there are roots that they want to give back to society. But there, it is entirely on their own. It is almost impossible to find an 18-year-old or 19-year-old or 20-year-old staying with their parents. Oh, it is unheard of. But they have so much of land, they may have many houses, but I think, but because it's become a part of their life that I have to lead my own life. So the breakdown of the family is part of their culture. It is not an incidental thing. It is actually part of the education. It is a part of that their goal of Western lifestyle, which destroys the culture of families, which destroys our values. It breeds atheism. Today, when they talk of secularism, they have gone to such an extent to say that secularism really means what? It means respect for all religions. It doesn't mean throw all religions out. The meaning we get is that the minute you bring the word religion, it becomes anathema. It becomes, in anything. And particularly in institutions like education institution or the government. I mean, even there's a big controversy if someone just has a photo of some lord in his office, became a big thing. One of the ministers was hauled up because he had a photo of Ganesh ji in his office. And I said, how you can be? So, this kind of controversy is bred because there is a craziness. It's movement going towards that taking means wanting to remove any traces of spirituality because that goes against materialism, and that goes against consumerism. And if there is a dedicated interest in preserving and nurturing and encouraging consumerism, materialism, and individualism, then this is a big enemy. So the real fight internally is not external, that I belong to this country, that country. The internal issues are really this, that absence of God will promote other values, and presence of God will promote different values. So that's where the internal tug of war is. So when we look at, say, education, when we appreciate, we do appreciate, we have so many, we have in our own Brahmacharya ashram in Mumbai, in this temple itself, we have at least 35, 40 of them who have come from just IIT Powai. But we don't boast, they don't boast of it and say, I have come from IIT Powai. You don't even know. We can't even recognize that. It's incidental. But then there are some who may not have gone beyond a basic degree, a university degree. So they have used their talent, and they're using it in their own way. If they have been blessed with that creativity or their understanding, that sharpness to not only understand philosophy, but to be able to make complex things into very simple things. And we see so many books by so many devotees. It's amazing how they're making it. But they still retain the humility because they understand that that also has come from Krishna. So that's what is needed. So education, they've gone through the same education. So nothing wrong with the pursuit of education, but the consciousness with which we pursue and the dangers that are there in today, where it is actually, if we do not see it for what it is, it can breed arrogance, it can breed our urge to be very self-centered, and that will take us away from Krishna. And same way for high birth, aristocracy, pedigree, lineage. This also the danger is that we don't know. Nobody can claim. Not a single entity can claim that why he is born or she is born in this place or that place. We have no idea. But then we suddenly we talk of blue blood, and then the class division takes place. There is a division, whether it's by wealth, whether it's by education, whether it's by then the caste system comes into place. So it's a perverted reflection of what has been mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, that the divisions were based only on activity and karma, and their own abilities, rather than on birth. And here, today, everyone then starts segregating physically, looking at it, which is so foolish in one way, but so dangerous. So this can happen when we think of me, mine, and I am something superior. I am in this particular lineage, or I'm particular, I'm special. And therefore, you look down upon. So we create divisions accordingly. We do not see people that we all are actually the same. Some may be more blessed with being, because of the karma, they may be blessed in a particular house. Some may be blessed, maybe having less privileges. But let's not forget that if you've been given the opportunity for Vaishnava education, that's the highest blessing. Then that means we are specially privileged. And it's a causeless mercy. And that causeless, we have to pause and see that what means causeless? How can it happen? We are taught that everything has a cause. Like this microphone, somebody has created it, cannot be caused. Somebody is a manufacturer. So similarly, when say causeless mercy means we did not deserve that mercy, but we still got it. That we have been hearing this. We may disregard it or we may minimize it. But the fact remains that we have this Rajvidya, this king of knowledge, and we've been given this opportunity. So that is something which is special. But we don't act as a special. We don't walk about saying that I am now a devotee and I have... that is the most foolish thing. But to take this gratitude and to, as I said, pass the baton, to do what we can to help, whether helping in programs, helping in serving, helping at least taking the process forward, accepting it in our own life, taking that struggle and trying to overcome our weaknesses, helping in book distribution or in arranging kathas, attending the programs, spreading the word. This is all kinds of service, along with what we do. So this kind of opportunity comes to us, and we are grateful for it rather than thinking that I am someone special. And we talked of hankering and lamentation, right? So the lamentation is the opposite, because if someone has received something and then it's deprived, that person it's taken away from him, it's the worst thing, because then they cannot live without it. And if they have not got it, then they are always looking forward. So it's, once you've got something and it's gone, and things are temporary, then they're lamenting. The lamentation will always be that if only I had this, if only I had that, if only I was born in this family, if only I had a better husband or a better wife, if only my in-laws were better nature, if only this, if only that. That means we are blaming others. We do not take responsibility for our situation. We do not see that Krishna has provided us this particular situation with all the challenges there, but there are so many other, there's much more to be grateful for, but we don't look at that. So if we see, it's a matter of, again, conscious, how we look at it. If we keep lamenting and just think, if only, then we will always be miserable. And we'll make others also miserable. So we're never satisfied. I wish this and I wish that, I wish this. You can't live a world in fantasy. And it's also not the correct consciousness to say that it's not that, okay, I'm born with a lot of more problems. The other person is born with less problems, but I'll accept it. Even that's not a correct understanding. Actually, if you actually look around, and that is where the beauty of association of devotees comes in. When we really associate, we see that, constantly we see that there are many other people who have much more difficult situations than us. And then only when we come in contact with them, in terms of we come to know about them, when we understand their situation, and they're usually the last people to talk about. So especially if they're a genuine devotee, so he or she will not, but when you come across and then you find out that what that person has gone through, what challenges that person has gone through, then you start, it's a sobering thought that I would not, if I had been put into that, I would not have gone through that situation. So that is the beauty of association, that actually it helps us to understand that instead of blaming others, we should be grateful for what we have. And what we have and what I can do to my life is what is the challenge in front of me. So Srila Prabhupada once said that regarding association of devotees, he said, if somebody thinks that he can progress in Krishna consciousness without the association of devotees, he's insane. He used this word, a person is insane, that's not possible. You just cannot do it. Nobody can do it. You cannot just take the books, go to some place and manage on your own. So it is not that it is easy, because we have our own natures, we have our own backgrounds, and association doesn't mean just a collection of physically putting people together. And usually when we come with our neophyte understanding, we do find it challenging at times, but it is worse without it. And then we can, with our better understanding, we can improve. So the example is given of this animal called a porcupine. And if you know the porcupine, it is it's got all these kind of thorn-like, what do you call that? spikes, yeah, very spiky, and all round. So the analogy is that, just like when you get in touch with porcupine, you'll be having pinpricks, you'll be having more than pinpricks, maybe it can scratch you, it can hurt you. But same way, when you're associating, because of our consciousness and other people's consciousness, we may have, um, emotional bruises, or we may have arguments, we may have problems, we have difficulties in accepting and adjusting. But we just carry on. We have to go on, without, the steadiness has to come in. So as we go ahead, as we go along, then things will settle down. I had heard one very nice lecture on association devotees from Avatar Leela Prabhu. He had made a presentation some years ago. And that he was quoting Gaurang Prabhu. He said, Gaurang Prabhu mentioned that we have the complete package. He said, we have, because the mind is purified by the holy name, the intelligence is strengthened by the Shastras, but false ego can only be dismantled by association of devotees. So it's something which is very important to remember. He also quoted Gaur Gopal Prabhu. Gaur Gopal Prabhu said that if we read the Shastra, when we read the Shastra, we gain knowledge. When we are hearing from other devotees, we are getting wisdom. But with that wisdom, if we serve other devotees, then we get realization. And when we get all the three, that is, we get knowledge, wisdom, and realization, then that is maturity. So basically, it all depends on how we look at situations, and that depends on our consciousness. And that consciousness needs to be bathed, to be nurtured, to be strengthened by Krishna consciousness. So then everything, we start seeing things, in our own way. Sometimes, as we said many times in the past, that in association, because we are also making mistakes regularly, we may offend someone, or someone says something which upsets us. But if we don't, again, if we have the maturity not to take that as to make it so egoistic that becomes the benchmark for my relationship with the other person, rather than, okay, you may have a spat, or it may be an argument, or it may be, because we may be very spontaneous in our, some people they can absorb it, some people don't. These mistakes happen. But if we throw away the crucial aspect of the understanding of that, what real association is, and the appreciation that this person is also struggling for the same reason that I am struggling, for trying to understand Krishna consciousness, and we are all in the same boat in different backgrounds, then if we see that, then all other differences will become very small. Association is also, Avatar Leela Prabhu said, gave many examples of that it is very, very rare, so it should not be taken cheaply. And he quoted one specific example of His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. When Radhanath Maharaj was in New Vrindavan in the early days, once Srila Prabhupada had come there, I think in 1974, he had come for 10 days and he gave a 10-day Bhagavad Saptah. It was called, the series was lectures on Bhagavad Dharma. Now his service was, he was up on the, what they call Old Vrindavan now, which is it's on a hill. From there to come down to what they called Bahulaban and Madhuban, where the lectures were. The Bahulaban was where the Grihasthas were managing, the temple was down there. And Old Vrindavan was 3 miles up the hill. Yet he, every single day, all the 10 days, and he had to offer 6 offerings, and he was also milking the cows. So he had practically used to sleep 2 hours a day. Still, somehow he managed to come every day when Prabhupada was there for 10 days and go up. He adjusted in such a way that he would really, so that means he appreciated the value of association of a sadhu and gave it the highest priority. Similarly, here also, when we have the opportunity, or when we have not just Radhanath Maharaj, but we have many great souls, who, especially the visiting souls. Of course, ideally, we should be attending or hearing Bhagavatam on a daily basis, or at least reading, in touch with scriptures on a daily basis. But at the very least, when we have special guests who come here, special devotees, and when we hear about it, we get the text message or WhatsApp message, we should go out of the way to really take full advantage of it. Um, so we should not take it cheaply. Also, we should be very personal in our dealings. He said that association will really improve if our understanding will improve if we don't let social statuses come in way.
So it is a man.
We discussed in the past that how some of the obstacles like wealth, good looks, education, this could be, why it could be a hindrance is only if we have a consciousness which can give us the feeling that I am special, which means then it goes against this principle. So he was saying that if we should make sure that there is no, just like Krishna and Sudama. You know, Sudama came from a very simple background, but Krishna, being the supreme person of Godhead, and having a very, he never ever gave that impression. So we also should see that social statuses should never have the slightest influence on relationships between devotees. It's also very safe to be in association of devotees because when we're in association of devotees, we'll always see that there will be devotees who are doing very serious, very steady. Just at the time when we are having a weak moment and we see someone, then he or she reminds us of our vows and our duties. So it's like when you go to class, you know, you are duty bound because you have got your test, your exam, and then there's a teacher who tells you you have to do this. So you're on your toes. Here, in that sense, it's much more relaxed. But at the same time, if you are observant, and we also know what we should be doing or where we may be transgressing or where we are now going through, you know, sometimes it happens that we have a run of very good things happening. And then, just like Sugriv, you know, he forgot his vows because he was quite relaxed. You know, he had vowed to Lord Ram that I'll help you. And then actually when his brother Vali was killed by Lord Ram, then temporarily he forgot and he was pretty relaxed. And then it took Lakshman's just a little bit of showing a display of his anger, and then Sugriv really, to his credit, he came back to his consciousness. So something like that, it could happen that when we're in a good run, means some good news come all the time, everything is happening nicely, we become a little lax in our Krishna consciousness. This could happen over months or years also perhaps. And therefore, when we're in association, if we don't miss that, there is always, Krishna will provide. If we have a desire, then Krishna will provide that reminder to come to us. Either in the physical presence or in somebody speaks a word and you feel guilty about it. But somewhere we will get this, that we have, oh, I have got my responsibility, I have got my vows. We may not speak to anyone, but we will not forget it. So we should remember and acknowledge the favors that people have given to us. That's something which will improve how our relationship with devotees. Because that, Prabhupada said that a sign of intelligence is gratitude. Again, see, we never associate gratitude with intelligence, but Prabhupada said a sign of intelligence is gratitude. It means if you're really if you're aware, if you're conscious, if you're understanding, then you would know that being grateful is one of the most important things. Also, we will see that tolerance is something which comes naturally among devotees. And that is one of the most important attributes that we need to develop. And if we don't have that, then being in association with those devotees, or at least observing that, hearing about it, reading about it constantly, and our Shastras are full of that. And why only Shastras? Even our current years, I mean, you'll have so many cases of devotees silently doing their own work, but tolerating their very difficult situations. I mean, just to cite an example, a few weeks ago, I was privileged to go to a village just about 5 hours from here called Javale Baleshwar, where more than 35, 40 of those villagers actually are staying in Mumbai. They're all devotees. Incidentally, that the 1,000 people in that village, every family has a devotee. If they're not all devotees, at least one per family. And almost 40 stay in Mumbai, then the hospital or the school in Vada, then many projects. Our initial batch of the Lady Northcote Hindu Orphanage, the orphan boys also come from there. So when I went there, just for the day, but I was completely shocked because this village had, they were actually kind of inaugurating a lift irrigation scheme. They only designed it, and they were bringing water from, from a lower level, almost 1,000 feet up, and then they were getting water for drinking. So for the last 40 years, at least, the people who were there, they were just describing in a matter of fact that what was their life, that they were spending, walking 8 to 10 kilometers every day to just get a pot of water, and that was what they had to use for everything, for their water, for their cooking, everything, for 5-6 months in a year. They have very good rainfall, but that rainfall would stop only by after October, and then it would run off by November, December, and then beyond January, February, for the last 4 months before the next monsoon comes, the real problem was that they had no that walk. So imagine every day 8 to 10 kilometers. So many of the boys who are now in their 30s and who were in our orphanage also, they were recalling that for us, this was a way of life, that we were also helping our mothers. We would also go there and help to collect the water. Not only that, but then the government had put up a dam some kilometers away. So with the result that that did not give them any water as such, but at least the water levels under the ground had improved. So they used to get some trickles of water coming. So that would come, so the ladies would spend hours just taking palmfuls of water and putting in the bucket. Now this is a daily activity, 7 days a week, 360, at least for those 4-5 months. So yet, if they were able to take up Krishna consciousness and were contented, and you should have seen the kind of outpouring of happiness when a basic thing like just getting water from a lower level to now just having water on tap was, you cannot believe how happy they were. So they really valued. So how did they look at their miseries? They looked at it and said that this is the Lord's arrangement. They were not fatalists. They did what they could. But when the water came, they were very appreciative. And not only that, but how they remained devotees, and how they had the temple, and how they would get together for satsangs and kirtans was beyond me. In this kind of situation, imagine every day, 1/3 of your time is going only to get water. The husbands had to go down somewhere to get some job because there was no water there. So, so when we look around, we see that people, how they can tolerate, and that tolerance example can reflect on other people's lives. So we may be going through a miserable time, but if we do it right, we don't know how many people are getting inspiration by that. That's why Prabhupada wrote in the Krishna book that greatness is estimated by how one can tolerate provoking situations. Right? And so this is one of the cases where we can see. Also, if you have spent time in ISKCON or among devotees, like part of society, you see that so many people, by incalculable number of people who have gone through all kinds of abuses in their childhood, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, it's been, there can be social stigmas. And yet, if they have over 20, 30 years, I get great inspiration when I know some of the people I know who have gone through this, but it's just that you accidentally come to know. It's not that they have, and they have, it's been a mark on their life, but still, over so many decades, they remain in Krishna consciousness. So these are examples you will inevitably find, because this is part of society. So when we see this, then we understand what is happiness, then we actually find the urge to serve, we find the urge to help in whatever way we can. So then we also understand that our problems are very minuscule. Then we also know that what we have received is not only for us, but to be shared with others. And that is not luck, that it's not just that I was lucky. Someone has designed it that way. If they have designed it, then that means there must be something, some reason why they've given this. Some reason why you or I have been chosen to be given this knowledge, this opportunity to understand. Right? So then we have to find out that what can I do with it? The worst thing is that if we have this knowledge, we take it on a mental level and don't do anything about it. Because there is a reason why we have been given, and what we do with it is important. When we read the journey home and we hear about Radhanath Maharaj's travels, how much difficulties he went through, But you see how he accepted it. So that is something which is not only to appreciate, but also to try to put it and compare it in our lives and say that in a less difficult situation, can I also try to put up some kind of same kind of consciousness? His Holiness Bhaktitit Maharaj, most of us know how, when he went through for the last 6-8 months of his cancer, and his life was, in spite of physical pain, his life became a great inspiration to so many people. So if you remember that in our difficult times, then we don't have a problem. We actually don't see it as a problem. We just overcome it. We get more courage to face it. So we may feel that I don't have these qualities. I don't have these qualities. Someone may say that you're telling all this, but then Prabhupada said that he told his disciples, you didn't have any qualities, I have made your qualities. And the proof of it is that right through the 60s and 70s, the thousands and thousands of people who came to him, so just look at their backgrounds. When they were, most of them had become hippies and they were rejecting society. So if they could transform themselves just because of their sincerity, it's proof that the formula works. The Shastras, what they say is true. I saw this recently in a ITV film, ISKCON Television. They have this film called Happiness on 2nd Avenue. So they've captured these moments in the 1960s. It's in black and white, but they've cleared it up. Yaduvara Prabhu has done a wonderful job. So you'll see that, and you see how these devotees, there are only 2 or 3 people who are as devotees. Most of the others who became devotees later, many of them, you could see that they were completely either on drugs or they were, all kinds of instruments, and the way they were sitting, the way they were clothed, everything. And Prabhupada is serenely just giving them that consciousness. And then we know what happens afterwards when we read his biography, how people's lives changed. So we can make progress only when by invoking the Vaishnava's mercy. This is the kind of catchline to everything that we do in life. Ultimately, spiritual progress means if we want to make any kind of, by pleasing others, we can only do it if we are, means we can't do it on our own endeavor. So it is invoking the mercy means if we have done something which, so we have got causeless mercy to come to this. But now to progress further, we have been given this opportunity. So when we turn towards the Lord and He tells us how, through His representatives, how we should be continuing to serve or to progress or to struggle in our own lives, in our individual situations, then that is actually the only way which He can invoke means the mercy comes to us. And when the mercy is coming, then we are, we get that much strength and the protection to carry on. So if you see I'll just conclude by this last thing that when devotees are departing from this world, and we have seen many examples how they are, they have been so fortunate that devotees are surrounded by other devotees. Then there's always chanting going around. They have been given, people are praying for them. And most important when we see that, how they are fairly peaceful, content, they don't have any anxieties especially if they've been given a kind of terminal illness. So several months, they have gone through difficulties. We have interacted with them, and we have seen how their consciousness has taken them to levels which, we are so inspired by. So we can see from that it has not happened accidentally. They have done their part, but that means what has happened that they've invoked that mercy. So, and we can actually see it that they have been you in one sense you can't see it physically, but you can apparently feel it that there is some people pushing them over the line, and there's some people pulling them over the line. Right? The finishing line is you can say where we have to depart. So it is apparent that so the gurus there or gurus representatives among devotees, well-wishers, spiritual well-wishers. people who are chanting, all of them, they're pushing him across the line. Now, we have got through millions of lives, and now in this one life, if we have got this opportunity, and then if we are now in the last moments, and the last few days, and the last few hours, and the last minutes, and then people are helping us to really get, 100 on 100 in our exam. This is the final exam. And then they're pushing us across the line. We don't even have to do anything. They're pushing us. And on the other side, Krishna is pulling. Because Krishna said, he's promised that you turn towards me and I will take you back. Guru is taking you back. So there is a pull and a push both in the same direction. So you are so fortunate. We are so fortunate. And we see this. So this, when we observe, when we, Krishna will reveal this, when we see, this is that, and this is one thing which everyone is generally fearful of, that what will happen when my life is going to, sometimes we may have this worry, or many times we may have this worry, especially depending on our age and our health. Then we can reflect on this and see that there is not only courage displayed by so many devotees and people all the world, and not just in ISKCON, but anyone who takes to spiritual life, God will always reciprocate in whatever form he or she prays to him. But when he does that, then at the last moment, it's guaranteed that there will be people who will be pushing you. Now, you may say that this person died alone, but what his consciousness was, what her consciousness was, we have many examples of that. That people, so it's not the physical, but it is the kind of mood, and Krishna will provide. So whether it is in what circumstances, many things are not seen, and what circumstances is being pulled on the other side across the line is not seen, but it will definitely happen. So we'll end here, and thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.